Hello and welcome back to Outlook from the Inside. I'm Mike Greenwald, business tax leader at Friedman LLP, and with us today is my partner, Jeff Resnick. And we are going to be talking about the employee retention credit. But before we get started, I want to share with you a little something about Jeff. I've always known him to be a bit of a risk taker when it comes to planning and being willing to explore all opportunities. And what I found out recently is that Jeff is actually a double black diamond ski instructor. So, if you think that dealing with taxes and tax credits is any kind of a challenge, you should know that Jeff is really up to any challenge that you could possibly throw at him. I myself just stay in the lodge and watch people like Jeff come down the hill. So welcome, Jeff.
Well, thanks, Mike. Good to see you. And that was in my youth. As of
Well,
now, I try to stay with a nice blue groomed trail.
I still think of you as youthful. And anyhow, so what exactly is the employee retention credit, briefly?
So the employee retention credit is a refundable payroll tax credit. And depending on what year, whether it's for 2020 or 2021, and we can talk about that, is a credit against wages. For 2020, it's 50% of the first 10,000, 2021, up to 70% of the first 10,000 of wages per quarter.
So it's been around since last March. I mean, this isn't something that's brand new with the latest version of COVID relief. What's changed now that everyone is so interested in it?
So it's a great question. The most significant change was that as originally as part of the CARES Act, when this came out in March of 2020, if an employer had a PPP loan, they were precluded from taking the employee retention credit. As part of the Consolidated Appropriation Act of 2021, which was recently passed December, that was turned off. So all of a sudden, retroactively, anybody that got a PPP loan still was eligible to get the employee retention credit. That was the main change, what turned it on and what got everybody excited, as well as some specifics in the calculation of the credit itself.
So how do I know if my business is eligible to take this credit? What are the criteria? What do I need to do?
So you have to look at a number of things. In order to get this credit, you have to have one of two economic hardships. So either a significant decline in gross revenues during the calendar quarter, or the full or partial suspension of the operations during 2020, originally, now including 2021, due to orders of a government or a specific government authority that limits commerce, travel, or group meetings due to COVID-19.
So is there a difference depending upon the size of my business? I know with the paycheck protection laws, the PPP loans, certain businesses of certain sizes weren't eligible. Is there a difference with ERC in terms of business size?
Yes, specifically in the ERC, in order to determine the amount of credit, you have to really look at three things. One, am I eligible? Did I have one of these two things that caused my business to have an economic hardship? Two, if I am eligible, what would be the time frame of the period of that eligibility? And that would depend, again, based on which one of those two hardships. And three, what is the size of my company? So if my company is a small or large employer, and in 2020, that's defined as under 100 employees, and that's full-time employees that worked more than 30 hours a week or 130 hours a month. So for 2019. So if I have more than that, I'm a large employer. Under that, I'm a small employer, and that will dictate or determine the amount of the credit.
And is that number still the same for 2021?
Well, that's the beauty of 2021, and while everybody's so excited about it, because for 2021, a number of things have changed. One, that small employer or large employer now is expanded to 500 employees. So that significantly increases the pool of people that can get this credit. Additionally, the credit was 50% of the first $10,000 of qualified wages for the entire year. For 2021, it's 70% of the first 10,000 of wages per quarter. And, as part of the act that came out in December, they expanded it to for the first 2 quarters only. As of 2 weeks ago, it was just expanded for the entire 2021 through the end of this year.
Now, you made an interesting point. You said it's based on the count, or determining what size employer I am depends on how many full-time employees I had in 2019. Does that mean I can only get the credit for my full-time employees, or do I get it for all wages that I pay to all employees?
So again, that's the beauty of the credit. It's for depending on the size of the employer, large or small. It's for all wages that were paid. If you're a small employer under 100, it's for all wages paid within that economic hardship period, either the full or partial suspension of your operations, or a decline of 50%, or now in 2021, 20%. If you're a large employer, it is only for wages paid to employees that are not providing services to the employer. But that's all employees, whether that's part-time, that's full-time. And just to add, it's not only wages, it includes health insurance paid to the employee as well.
Suppose I have employees that I'm just paying their health insurance. In other words, they're not working. I can't afford to pay them wages, but I'm still paying their health insurance. Can I get a credit for that?
Absolutely. And we've seen that a lot in 2020, where many employees were furloughed, yet the employer continued to pay the health insurance. And the health insurance is specifically included as part of the calculation on the maximum, as long as that employee is working. Severance doesn't count, and any other type of payment wouldn't count. But if the employee is working or furloughed, or you're paying health insurance to them, that would qualify.
Now, you talked about the PPP loans, and I know you and I have talked about this a lot off camera. And I know I've heard that I can't use the same dollar of wages for my PPP loan forgiveness as I use for my ERC. So how do I handle that interaction? What's the guidance out there? And, is there any, really complete guidance out there from the IRS or the SBA on how I handle the interaction between the two programs?
Up until 2 weeks ago, we were just scratching our heads, but they came out specific with guidance that I will tell you is a little counterintuitive, but also typical of the guidance that we've seen come out on this. And first is that, as you mentioned, you cannot use the same wages for the employee retention credit and a number of other credits. So the Family First Corona Response Act, Work Opportunity Credit, Research and Development Credit, or PPP. So you can't double dip. What they specifically came out, though, and said in this last notice is that you first calculate the employee retention credit, come up with what those qualified wages are, then look at the PPP and see, did I use any qualified wages in order to get forgiven? And to the extent that you needed any of those qualified wages for the bare minimum to be forgiven, that does not qualify for employee retention credit. So again, backwards logic. And that's where the planning comes in to make sure that you maximize the credit.
What else do I have to watch out for when I'm dealing with these payroll credits?
We always warn our clients that the payroll taxes itself, they're trust funds. So you do need to be careful that you just don't stop paying or just randomly picking numbers, because the owners or officers may be personally liable. What you need to look at very carefully is the interaction on the PPP and how do I maximize the PPP and maximize the employee retention credit. And if looked at correctly and planned correctly, we believe that you have that opportunity in many cases.
Any last words of advice for our viewers on this? So it seems like there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, you want to please seek guidance. If you haven't already applied for a PPP forgiveness, look at it carefully. You want to put in as many non-payroll items, and that's been greatly expanded over this period of time. So you want to try to use as little qualified wages as possible in that period so that you can maximize both. If the periods don't overlap, maybe there's a gap period where you got the loan later than the employee retention credit. So you really need to look at it on an employee by employee basis, on a period basis, on the total amount that's being spent, and plan for it as well as you can. If you already applied for forgiveness, you want to look at that carefully to see what your options are, and again, how you can maximize what you've already told the government.
Those are great words of advice, Jeff. And thank you for being with us here today. And thank you all of you for watching.